Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Management, a VUCA perspective. We are discussing core concepts and I am your friend and tour guide on this amazing, exhilarating and really fun journey, Siddhi Bhattacharyya. Now we've discussed how segmentation happens, targeting is done, positioning is something which is central to set where your brand needs to be in the consumer's mind. And then we've discussed a variety of other factors including pricing, the sensitivity of it, the psychology that drives consumer responses. But now we come to the heart of the matter, communications. Marketing and communications are as inseparable as life and the soul. So, as long as communications is there, marketing will get its job done. Yes, but thereafter the particular kind of communications that need to be done have to be top notch. That is the direction towards which any good marketer worth their salt will want to move that conversation needle. And with that, we have the quote from Dominic Walters, who is a leadership communications consultant, who says, marketing communications is not a nice to have, it is a must have. Any marketer worth their salt needs to understand how communications happen and therefore use them for the organization's benefit. It's the age old adage of talking. You and I talk and there is conversation. So, hence brands and consumers need to also talk and there will be answers for every communication piece that is created from there. Communicating is central to marketing and is its core delivery of setting up continuous dialogue with the end consumer, because over these conversations are where business transactions really happen and the consumer ends up feeling better about the brand as they go along. They become more loyal and they tend to give the entire benefit of the lifetime value to that particular brand in question. So, today we are getting into communications, which is the biggest tool in the marketing space, and with that we get into the art and science of marketing communication. Now, this exploration covers the world from today's contemporary perspective as well. So, therefore, you have got today's digital ecosystem where the average consumer actually gets bombarded with over 5,000 marketing messages on a day-to-day basis, and this makes effective communication that much more important and it is mission critical, because without this you will not be able to make a dent in the consumer's mindset. And it is not just about superior products and competitive pricing. Organizations need to master the delicate balance of connecting with their stakeholders, and this has to be, like we discussed, why are you doing this? So, hence purpose, it has to be purposeful, it has to give strategic messages across, and these have to resonate in an increasingly fragmented and noisy media landscape, because everybody else and their uncle is vying for the mind space and the time of the end consumer. This presentation dissects how iconic brands like Apple, Nike, Coca-Cola have crafted compelling narratives, and these compelling narratives have helped create that consistency which is required for the brand to be seen in a particular light by the entire set of consumers that it wishes to display it to, and adapt seamlessly across multiple channels. There are extremely powerful frameworks, very time tested and very sound frameworks, such as the IDA model, the awareness, the interest, desire and action. So, this is the IDA framework. The IDA model has advanced storytelling techniques and helps transform prospects into loyal advocates. So, the entire IDA model works in that particular funnel, and while sharing concrete methods, you measure the ROI, because at the end of the day it is a cost intensive activity. So, whatever costs you put in into marketing, there have to be certain returns on the investment done. So, there are sophisticated engagement metrics, conversion analytics and sentiment tracking, which marketers must get into, and this reveals the foundational principles that elevate ordinary marketing into meaningful, impactful conversations. It can, with the same principles, drive the documented 67% increase in consumer lifetime value. So, the LTV can be actually bumped up by that kind of number, where you have got 67% increase, and it comes with the authenticity in the brand relationships, and all thanks to communication. So, with that in mind, let us get into the discussion. Now, there are modern challenges to communication. Consumers face that 4,000 to 10,000 brand messages. It is a huge deluge of all these communication messages coming their way, and it comes across hundreds of cable channels, thousands of publications, 2 billion websites. Everything is vying, it is battling very, very fiercely for the attention of the consumer, and the media is constantly fragmented. Worse off, consumers' attention spans are gone, and so therefore, strategic questions have evolved as to how to manage this, because it is not simply whether to communicate, but it is actually more nuanced. So, what precise message will resonate, which channels will be used for maximizing the impact, whether it is social media, email, influencer partnerships, traditional outlets, how are you going to go and create the 2.7 exposures typically needed for recognition. So, that is typically how brands operate. And most critically, how can marketers identify and connect with their ideal audience through sophisticated demographic and psychographic targeting. So, all of these factors have to be thought through, and these have to be implemented by marketers. Strategy wise, in this saturated landscape, you have to break through, and it requires more than just the volume. It requires relevance, because it has to be apt to the particular conversation that is required with the brand. It has to be personalized, because consumers need to speak as if you are not speaking to a crowd, but to them one on one, and authentic connections need to be forged from there. If you see, design experiences can generate 27% higher emotional responses and 23% greater memorability, because people do not remember the complete episode at times. They will remember fragments, and they will attach a certain emotion, and they will park it away in their minds for the next conversation whenever it should come. And this happens through content that speaks to consumers as individuals and not as a larger, like we said, crowd or demographic. Unilever's Dove campaign for real beauty exemplifies this approach. It transforms the brand value from 2.5 billion to 13.5 billion. That is the kind of systemic shift which communication can actually create, a remarkable 425% increase. So, this featured women of diverse body types and challenged the conventional beauty standards. And similar success stories include Patagonia's environmental activism and Nike's Dream Crazy campaign, and each forged powerful emotional bonds and prioritized authenticity of the end consumer. They celebrated the way the consumer was in their actual real element, and they actually put out the shared values over traditional advertising tactics. So, what is the fundamental purpose of marketing communication? It becomes the voice of the brand first and foremost. So, marketing communication establishes what is the authentic personality. So, whether IBM is authoritative, or Dollar Shave Club is playful, or Nike is inspirational, which just says do it, just do it. This consistent voice creates something which is recognizable about that particular brand and across all consumer touch points. So, social media, packaging, billboards, everything will showcase the exact same conversation, because you have to be remembered and understood by the consumer as one particular set of brand values, and this can actually help increase revenue by up to 23%. This is what research data shows us. Consumers also need to be educated about brands, and effective messaging does that. It gives you the product benefits and does it through compelling storytelling. So, therefore, consumers understand how Airbnb transforms your travel through local experiences, how Apple simplifies technology for creatives, how Patagonia's sustainable materials benefit both users and environment alike. And targeted education can address crucial 60 to 70% of the purchase journey, and it is completed before consumers even interact with any sales team wherever. And it creates defensible brand connections. Coca-Cola connects itself with happiness, Volvo with safety, Dove with authentic beauty. So, all these things are cemented once consumers are properly exposed to those brand connections, and this can help convert consumers into advocates for the brand, ultimately driving 65 of the business for that particular brand from repeat customers instead of focusing on new acquisitions. Now, how do you build brand equity through communication? You create awareness, which is the first stage. You deepen the brand presence in consumer consciousness through 7 to 12 targeted touch points across media channels, and it can give you up to 85% recognition in that space and primary demographics, and drive 63% consideration increase. So, these are factors which research tells us. In terms of the brand image, precisely crafted messaging can help create a distinctive voice and language and shape the consumer perceptions about that particular brand, and they can element wise they can trigger various emotional responses. Apple has relatability, Red Bull has adventure, Chanel has sophistication. So, you remember the attributes of each particular brand because they are acting in a certain way. Customer loyalty is built over time because authentic consistent dialogue is there, and so therefore, if you get emails from, let us say, a brand you trust and like, then there are chances of 25% open rate, because otherwise you will just discard that mail or overlook it. Social engagement happens because if you got 4 hours of response time within which you respond to consumer inputs, then the community actually gives you benefits for that, and it converts first time buyers into brand advocates because they feel they have been heard by the brand. And these loyal customers demonstrate about 67% higher lifetime value and attract 5.2 new customers through word of mouth annually. And yes, obviously, there is a financial value added to it. So, it enables approximately 18 to 23% price premiums over non-branded alternatives and drives 3 to 5 annual market share growth and 70% of the intangible asset value of the organization. So, for mid-market companies, this translates to 1.9 to 2.3 million additional quarterly revenue from strategic communication investments. So, what is the larger macro model of communication in marketing? At the outset, you need to understand that there is noise and interference, which is the general challenge which everything needs to overcome when it comes to communication. All the environmental disruptions are there to stop you from doing your job. Then you have got feedback and response, which is where you have to become a better listener for consumer feedback and quickly also actively respond to what they have to say. Then you have to ensure that your message and the choice of media used to send that message across is very carefully picked up. You have to encode your message there, and the message has to be decoded by the end consumer. This is a tricky one to understand because the transformation of core brand propositions into sensory rich communication that addresses target audiences who can readily interpret what the cultural and experiential frameworks are, and effective encoding creates consistent visual language. It creates more facets, more assets around the brand, and those are remembered by the end consumer. So, there are distinctive voice elements, memorable narrative structures, and this simplifies the complex value propositions into intuitive messaging, and people are more akin to listening to the brand and accepting what they have to say. And then the roles of the sender and receiver. So, in this case, the brand entity with clearly articulated purpose communicating to meticulously profiled audience segments becomes the sender, and they become the receiver. This bidirectional relationship operates through a dynamic where organizations transmit intentional messaging to consumers characterized by specific psychographic attributes, documented purchase motivations, and predictable information processing patterns and mapped journey stages. We will get to each of these as we go along. So, we need to understand the key elements in effective communication first. What is the field of experience overlap? communication effectiveness increases by 68% if there is a substantial overlap between the sender and receiver knowledge domains. If there is a gap there, then there is more category education which is required, which means more communication and effort. Organizations which conduct thorough audience research before campaign launches experience 3.2x higher engagement rates. So, you need to understand that your idea sits pretty with the audience and they will get what you are saying. That is very important. Coca-Cola's Share a Coke campaign exemplifies this particular principle. It leveraged the universal experience of personal names, because if I call you by name, a Sharad, a Rahul, a Purnima, or whatever your name might be, there will be a remarkable response to that, and that can result in sales. 70% sales can actually increase by tapping into shared cultural understanding across more than 80 countries. So, that is something which a brand really wants to catch hold of. Channel wise, it creates appropriateness, and so if you are present where your consumer is, then you will see that it gets you results. TikTok in the US captures 63% of Gen Z weekly attention, while email newsletters achieve only 42% open rates amongst executives who are aged 45 to 60. Lower age groups typically do not deal in email. So, effective channel selection must align precisely with the audience media consumption. Where is the audience present and where are you going to reach out to them? And therefore, you have to establish your channel credibility perceptions as well. Now, strategic channel integration helps by combining high impact live streaming, which gets you about 11 million plus viewers, and targeted press coverage, immersive in-store experiences, sophisticated digital advertising. All of these things together, when you bring them together and integrate them, you get integrated marketing communications. So, this is the end result of planning for consumers, audiences, and the media through which you will pass your information along. Then there are feedback mechanisms. Here you will see feedback systems reduce message distortion by 47%, and organizations also try 2 or more types of messages out by doing A/B testing. So, you put out both and see where your control versus test subjects actually respond to your messaging. You use sophisticated social listening tools and target post purchase surveys which can identify misinterpreted communications back at you within 24 hours. So, Netflix's recommendations engine analyzes over 5 billion daily viewer interactions and continuously refines content messaging and showcases how advanced feedback loops transform communication noise into valuable actionable intelligence. Now, how do you choose consumer processing filters? Because you have to listen to them and listen in a better way. So, you have to have selective attention at times. Consumers filter out astonishing 99.5% of that 5,000 marketing messages because they have selective attention. So, you need to be choosing to be with your consumer here. You have to focus only on personally relevant content. Smart marketers break through this barrier using pattern disrupting visuals. For example, 30% higher engagement is given when one does break through with that pattern. If you are able to do contextual targeting, then you deliver 45% better response rates, and timing when the consumer is available and willing to read that message or see it or hear it, you get weekday mornings yielding 27% higher engagement for B2B communications. So, all these things must be known because timing, messaging, channel choice, all of these things become very, very critical for marketing communications. You have to have selective distortion. A striking 71% of consumers unconsciously reframe messages to fit their existing beliefs, and this creates a powerful confirmation bias, and that is something which marketers can also use. Breakthrough campaigns like Apple's Think Different, it navigated this by anchoring products within this established value systems and employed consistent visual storytelling to all touch points and cemented the intended meanings. So, before any cognitive distortion can occur from, so some interpretation can occur from the consumer side, you have established what think different really means and you have taken a space up. In the same way, there is selective retention at the consumer's end. So, consumers retain only 10% of branded content after 72 hours, which is why you have to ensure retention going up by 65% when the messages align with pre-existing attitudes. Nike has their Just Do It campaign, which has been enduring for time immemorial, and this gives you the capability to blend powerful emotional narratives with strategic tagline repetition across decades, and this helps build persistent memory structures, and they survive long after the initial exposure also fades. The micro model of marketing communications is something which looks at the consumer response hierarchy. So, you want to first and foremost ensure there is awareness of you as a brand in the consumer's mind. Then you will be able to actually create advertising which gives you 37% effectiveness, and social media which gives you 42% in first exposures, and word of mouth which gives you a 78% trust rating. Various formats, but difficult to get to the word of mouth aspect. Market leaders like Coca-Cola maintain 94% awareness, that is the amount of spends they do on communication and advertising, and they have omnipresent visibility. Successful startup brands like Casper achieve 65% category awareness within 18 months through targeted media buys and distinctive visual branding across all these channels. You ensure that people know about you. So, the knowledge part is next. 82% of consumers seek 5 to 7 information touch points before forming product understanding. Modern brands like HubSpot drive knowledge acquisition through interactive content, which is about 45% higher than static information, comparison tools which are 32% conversion improvement, and strategically structured FAQ content that addresses up to 20 questions, and that is something which really helps build up your knowledge base in the consumer's mind. Then comes liking. So, here interest and liking start playing out, and brands like Airbnb cultivate liking through consistent narrative storytelling across platforms. UGC or user generated content gets you 29% higher positive sentiment because it is similar to word of mouth, and it creates occurrence of social sharing about 47%, and time spent with the brand, which is branded content, gives you about 28% recall as well. Preference again is a disposition now building for that particular brand and product. When you have clear differentiation, 60% of preferred brands are seen as distinctly different from competitors. Leading companies like Tesla establish preference through category defining innovations, and that keeps the preference going for them, and it can also increase purchase frequency by 31%. And when you get strategic pricing of it right, 73% of consumers are willing to pay the premium price for brands they love, because they have categorized these as part of their mental hierarchies. They think of themselves as people who deserve these particular brands. So, hence they, given the opportunity, will definitely buy, and then this gets cemented as conviction. So, this conviction is something which surmounts the last psychological principle of last moment doubt before the buy happens, and this affects about 82% of high consideration purchases where more money is involved. So, consumer electronics leader Samsung drives the conviction through immersive in-store experiences, which gives you 42% conviction improvement, virtual reality demos which gives you 37% increase in purchase certainty, and social proof integration showing more than 18,000 5-star reviews during final decision stages. So, this is how brands push consumers to buy in. And then when you are in that last phase at the purchase point, analysis reveals that 67 of filled shopping carts are abandoned. So, that is still a risk you are running. So, here successful brands like Amazon reduce this through one-click purchasing, which reduces the abandonment by about 28%, and strategically timed incentives which give you 23% rescue rate, and streamlined payment options which give you 15% completion improvement. So, this is how purchase is pushed, and transaction details predict future behavior with close to 74% accuracy when properly analyzed. So, what are alternative response sequences? People learn things first, then they feel about them, and they finally get about doing things. So, high involvement purchases often offer this particular significant brand differentiation, Consumers conduct this through their research. They compare the specifications, so they learn about what the products are, they analyze what the particular brand does, they consult other experts before making their connections, and they look at emotional factors also, the brand trust, the aspirational value, the identity alignment, and finally get into purchasing the ultimate space. So, here BMW versus Mercedes, both are luxury vehicles, premium smartphones, Apple versus Samsung, high end appliances, Sub-Zero versus Viking refrigerators, all have these alternative response sequences where you first learn about the brand, then you feel what you want to, and finally go about doing the purchase. There is the reverse of this, which is the do, feel, learn. Here, where consumers purchase primarily based on availability or convenience, they develop emotional responses during the usage experience, the satisfaction, reliability or service quality, and subsequently they seek information to validate their choice. So, they are retrofitting their validation to their choice already made. Examples include airline travel, Delta versus United, insurance coverage where GEICO versus Progressive, and financial products where you have got Chains versus Bank of America mortgage. And then there is another more defined version which is happening nowadays, and this is happening typically in low involvement purchase, where you learn, then you do, and then you finally feel, which has limited brand differentiation to start things off, and this requires only the price and basic features to be known. Then they make rapid purchasing decisions driven by accessibility and established habits, and once they are done through that, that is when they actually go into post purchase exploration of how they felt about it. Common examples include batteries, Duracell versus Energizer, household essentials, Bounty versus Brawny paper towels, and routine grocery items where you get a store brand versus national based products. Now, what are the keys to a communication campaign success? The first thing you need to understand is it has to be strategically positioned. Here, you have to create distinctive brand attributes that stand out from competitors. You have to precision wise target to the audience where data segmentation is available to reach the high value prospects you want to hit first. You ensure that you capture their attention fully, and here there are pattern breaking techniques, emotional visuals, unexpected messaging frameworks which can give you up to 3.5x better recall. You ensure that what you are trying to say is understood very clearly, so comprehension clarity is also there, and finally you motivate towards a certain end point. So, here the call to action comes into play. Now, how do you measure communication effectiveness? This is the accountability of you have spent some money in marketing communications. Are you doing it right? Are you getting the result for the money spent? So, here you have got the traditional approach which went on from 1980s to the 2000s. Here rudimentary metrics were there, such as press clip volumes, which literally measured things by weight. Then you got gross rating points on TV, and raw campaign spend, how much did you spend in a particular quarter. Now, these were surface level measurements, and they really create a critical disconnect between communication investments and their impact on revenue growth. Then came intermediate metrics between 2000 and 2010s. So, here there were audience reach which showed you demographic targeting with approximately 2% precision, messaging penetration with about 35 to 45% brand recall, engagement depth, so which gave you 3.2 minutes per interaction, and cost per milli optimization which gave you 18 to 23% cost efficiency through strategic channel selection. The modern metrics are very complex. Contemporary marketers demonstrate concrete ROI through sophisticated attribution models. Here you look at communication touch points to purchase decisions, you have got 42% influence rate, you have got measurable brand perception which lifts that particular enable premium pricing to 4 to 7 higher prices, and quantifiable customer lifetime value increasing from $750 to $1,200 per influenced customer, and it has a direct contribution to quarterly EBITDA growth, which gives you 12 to 15% of overall business performance. So, a very complex measurement system is in place today. Going further, AI coming in, it will be far more complex as we find in the future. On the supply side, you have measurement approaches also. If you have got media coverage penetration, you see a 42% approximate penetration scale here, and this is the percentage of target audience who are reached through that strategic brand messaging. And the brand screen time is on an average 12.5 seconds is what the available duration of a logo during prime time sponsored broadcasts, sports broadcasts preferably, are showcased here, and entertainment integration, strategic product placement opportunities can give you this kind of exposure. And if you get insertions of 873 in print media, then quarterly print exposure is seen in column inches. So, therefore, you have got substantive brand mentions which leading industry publications, business journals and national newspapers. So, these traditional metrics effectively quantify media outputs and distribution reach. They fundamentally fail to connect communication activities to meaningful business outcomes, revenue generation or measurable consumer behavior changes. This is how supply side mentions are completely deficient in the traditional sense. So, these are the limitations of supply side measurement. You quantify only surface exposure, you capture visibility without the actual impact of whether that visibility was seen by people finally, monitors placement without context whether that particular point was relevant for the consumer, and tallies reach without resonance. So, you actually check whether the reach has actually affected some sort of audience movement or not. Demand side measurement approaches also exist, where you see recognition and recall, where if you quantify brand salience through rigorous day after recall tests, where it scored from 1 to 10, comprehensive recognition matrices with 70 to 90% effectiveness thresholds can be seen. Similarly, attitudinal impact, if you have got 5-point Likert scale surveys and semantic differential testing, you can measure pre and post campaign perception shifts with +12 to -15 indicating significant success, and emotional resonance mapping and NPS or net promoter score improvements targeting with +10-point gains. Now, behavioral response wise, you analyze tangible attribution metrics including website traffic, which can give you a 25 to 30% targeted lift, coupon redemption performance, which gives you 5 to 7% against industry benchmarks, and code activation, which is again benchmarked with 3.2% category averages. So, social engagement depth, first party purchase data, all of these are correlated by the amount of campaign exposure presented. And frequency assessment, this is very critical, because how many number of times, we have already heard of that 2.7 exposure requirement for one frequency. You conduct methodical A/B testing here across diverse consumer segments and determine the optimal exposure frequency, which ranges from 3 to 7 touch points based on the category, and effective reach percentages with 65 to 80% penetration targets. This ensures that the message saturation thresholds are met and comprehensive diminishing returns analysis is conducted. Now, you have to understand how advertising to sales is a chain of events, and that is affected by whatever activities are conducted in marketing communications. At the first point, there is ad expenditure. Here, your strategic allocation of marketing budgets of digital, television and other channels based on audience consumption patterns and cost efficiency metrics are measured, and this investment typically is 10 to 15% of your projected revenue and forms the foundation of your market visibility. Then you look at share of voice. Here, you see measurable media presence relative to competitors calculated through impression share, which is again digital, GRP volumes on broadcast media, TV and overall media weight. Brands maintaining SOV exceeding market share by 10% consistently demonstrate stronger growth in the subsequent quarters. In terms of mind share, cognitive brand position established through consistent messaging addressed via brand recall tests. These tests are again part of primary research conducted, and the benchmark in this case is 65% unaided awareness or top of mind awareness. Then you have got consideration metrics and association studies which help understand the picture more clearly. Effective campaigns deliver 15 to 20% improvement on these cognitive metrics. Then you have got something which is more complex called the heart share. Now, here emotional connections cultivated through authentic storytelling and values alignment is looked into, net promoter scores are taken, sentiment analysis is conducted and brand affinity metrics are looked into, and emotionally engaged consumers exhibit about 3 times higher lifetime value and 71% are more likely to convert to purchase. Market share wise, you will see the definitive commercial performance indicator tracked through unit based sales percentage or revenue based category share, and the research consistently demonstrates that a 10-point advantage in heart share typically translates to a 1.4 point market share gain within the next fiscal, which is a 12-month period. How do you pre-test whatever communication you have brought about? You get into focused groups where you take 8 to 12 carefully selected target audience representatives. You conduct a 90 odd minute discussion with them. There is a moderator who runs that entire show, and at times people from the client organization, the brand side, they can sit in exclusive rooms and listening to the conversation over CCTV. And despite inherent subjectivity, $5,000 to $8,000 sessions are consistently reveal critical blind spots in the campaign strategy, because they understand it straight from the consumer's mind. And major beverage brands discovered that health focused messaging was being interpreted as medicinal rather than refreshing. So, there are things that come across when the consumer starts interpreting the messaging live, and 28% higher audience resonance scores occur when consumers inputs are taken. Copy testing can also be done here. The copy which is there, the messaging which is there, all of these can be tested and minimum 70% threshold is achieved here. Comprehension rates are 85% of benchmark, and emotional engagement via facial coding and biometric responses can also be seen, and a minimum 15% lift in purchase intent is what is intended when you check copy. Now, these valuations from specialized vendors like Kantar and Ipsos, these are major names in the research space, they enable precise benchmarking against category norms. So, you can look at conversion rates going up by 23% after pre-testing revealed that the industry terminology was creating comprehension barriers for 62% of potential customers and allowing for targeted simplification. Then there is A/B testing, something which digital marketers love completely, because it gives you multiple creative executions across 5,000 plus statistically matched audience segments, and you can check performance in click through rates, engagement duration and other conversion metrics. Digital platforms require 95% confidence intervals to ensure statistical validity and reliable decision making. So, it is far more exacting compared to regular research. Now, what is the pre-testing debate all about? Because at times there are certain critics who believe that pre-testing shows compelling evidence showing 70% of ads that excel in controlled environments ultimately underperform in actual markets. Millward-Brown paradox actually demonstrates how advertisements with high test scores frequently fail to generate meaningful sales impact. Critics emphasize that artificial viewing conditions where participants give undivided attention to advertisements versus real world multitasking fundamentally shifts the way people respond to communication and messaging. Proponents of this say that Kantar's comprehensive analysis of 3,600 plus campaigns reveal pre-tested advertisements deliver 30% higher ROI than untested alternatives. So, both sides of the argument remain. Nike has an approach which is simply different. It says just do it campaigns intentionally bypass the conventional A/B testing. Instead, they utilize the proprietary consumer connections panel methodology. This approach prioritizes emotional resonance measurements over standard message recall metrics. The strategy has consistently generated industry leading brand lift and gets you 42% above category in 2022 and impressive 18% compounded annual growth in brand value since 2015. So, this suggests that intuition led approach offers substantial competitive advantages over more formulaic testing protocols. Now, measuring post campaign performance is the aftermath, because now you have to actually deal with the real thing. Pre-testing evaluates creative potential, post actually showcases what the market said when it saw your ad. This is the ultimate verdict on advertising effectiveness and captures significant 15-20% shifts in brand awareness and consideration. Behavioral indicators documented, which could be 8 to 12% increases in website traffic and store visits, and final outcomes, which could be quantifying the critical 5 to 7% sales lift during campaign periods. Nike balances this minimal pre-testing approach with exceptional disciplined post-campaign analysis, allocating about 3% of campaign budgets specifically to measurement. So, that is Nike's approach to this, and historically their approach to measuring sales impact has been this way. This sophisticated regression analysis and time series modeling to establish clear correlations between marketing investments and revenue outcomes. Data reveals compelling evidence of 133% increase in ad spending from Q1 to Q4, generating a corresponding 41% sales increase, while a 37.5% reduction in Q5's advertising budget triggered an immediate 18.2% sales decline. So, there are clear indicators of how spends have actually impacted results. And since the 1950s, organizations calculate precise advertising elasticity coefficients and establish reliable ROI benchmarks. This, not completely controlled as an experimental rigor or contemporary test market methodologies, historically has the invaluable longitudinal insights that reveal advertising's cumulative impact across multiple layers and quarters. Now, experimental versus measuring actual sales impact is something which is also very important for brands to do. You take a test market, and then for example, you Columbus, Indianapolis or San Diego, Phoenix with near identical demographic profiles showing 92 to 95% alignment across 15 plus variables, giving the median income of a certain level, home ownership rates which are similar, and age distribution which is plus to minus 2% variance in key segments. And then meticulously calibrated test control pairs, again similar to the randomized controlled trials in medicine. This is exactly what is incorporated here in research. So, this gives you the experimental answer. Media weight wise, you actually look at 3 to 5 distinct media intensity levels and look at various GRPs, 100, 200, 400 GRP benchmarks across matched markets while maintaining identical creative assets. This approach quantifies exact sales lift per $10,000 of incremental ad spend and identifies category specific saturation points where this will actually start working. So, let us say at 320 to 350 GRPs in retail will create the industry benchmark for that. So, comparative testing of media scheduling patterns reveals that the most CPG categories experience optimal results at 6 to 8 weekly exposures, with ROI declining 24 to 38% beyond this threshold. So, when you see an ad, how many times are you seeing? 5 and then 1 6 or 7 8, and this is where typically between 6 to 8 times having seen an ad, people start remembering. So, that is where the frequency game starts coming in. And when you look at sales attribution towards this, you take multi-point attribution, multi-touch attribution models and link your ad exposures to purchases and see 87% accuracy through household level digital identifiers, and this vastly outperforms the traditional methods 43% accuracy. So, digital has now given us this ability to actually map how much it can be associated between the advertising and the actual sales happening to see. The evolution of measurement focus. So, here again there is an impression area in the 1950s. This impression era defined Nielsen TV ratings and print circulation figures that prioritize reach over engagement, how many people were being reached by that particular campaign. Then there was an awareness era from the 80s to the 90s. Here you saw 24 to 48 hour brand recall rates about 20 to 30% and represent significant progress. Then there was an attitudinal era from 2000 to 2010. Here again Millward Brown's brand dynamics revolutionized measurement by mapping the complete consumer journey through purchase funnel metrics. So, this approach quantified precise shifts in brand consideration plus 15 to minus 20% amongst exposed groups and demonstrated how emotional connections drove 3 to 4 times higher conversion rates. Sales effect era, which is the current one, this looks at the performance very clearly and upfront. It showcases how 35 to 45% of sales fluctuations and related to specific channels happens and gives approximately 92% statistical confidence in the responses. And it shows multi-touch attribution identifies high value touch points generating $3 to $7 ROS across the digital ecosystem, and this is US specific numbers. India specific numbers also exist in the same benchmarking fashion. Now, when you track studies, the Millward Brown gold standard is over 30 plus years of attitudinal measurement is given when they use the brand dynamics methodology, and it is validated across 42 diverse industry verticals. 3,500 plus brand health indicators are tracked and they deliver 68% higher ROI for brands implementing the comprehensive 5-tier measurement pyramid. Markets with sales effect validation are over 70, where they actually check how econometric modeling has conclusively verified that our attitudinal metrics predict 72% of future revenue growth across all major global markets and cultural contexts. How Millward Brown does the brand dynamics pyramid? At the base level is brand presence or awareness, then the purpose or meaning, which is brand meaning, hence the kind of performance that is done. At the base level, they use something called consumer pulse surveys. Then they have an association map tool which tracks 40 plus category specific attitudes. Then they look at competitive advantage or relevance, and so they have something called conversion lens framework. On top of this, they have the brand bonding, which is done through showcasing the kind of advantage that brand has and delivers 72% higher retention rates with 3.8 times greater advocacy levels, and finally, the financial performance, which is the bonding. So, this showcases about 15 to 20% market share growth among loyal customers and 23% higher revenue potential, and the premium power pricing of 12 to 18% above category range. So, that is the structured growth for the Millward Brown brand dynamics pyramid. Now, what are the key benefits of continuous tracking studies? Because a variety of tracking studies by Kantar, Ipsos, Millward Brown, etc., are available for marketers to take up. A trend identification, where the brand dynamics metrics monitors essential KPIs is available and creates awareness to bonding conversion rates across 8 to 12 quarters and showcases meaningful performance patterns. Comparative context wise, you can see multi-brand tracking panels monitor up to 15 competitors simultaneously across 40 plus attributes and distinguish industry wide trends from brand specific momentum. And finally, they have the ability to identify competitive vulnerability gaps with 85% predictive accuracy in consumer goods as categories. Campaign diagnostics wise, wave over wave measurement, and they use the RCT test and control methodologies to isolate campaign ROI with confidence intervals of plus to minus 3%. Clients consistently identify creative executions that drive 2 to 3 times higher conversion rates. They also have an early warning system built in, where weekly dashboard reporting highlights any significant changes in key brand bonding metrics. This detection system identifies potential issues for 78% of the clients approximately 8 weeks before sales performance actually starts to showcase the decline. Measuring the communication ROI is a dual perspective. There are leading indicators on one side and there are lagging indicators on the other. Leading indicators show effect metrics such as forward looking signals that predict future performance outcomes. This have 15 to 20% increases in aided brand awareness and 8 to 12 points jump in brand favorability, with 5 to 7% growth in purchase intent in 4 to 6 weeks after campaign launch. On the other side, sales effects matrix demonstrate the tangible business impact of growth investments, 3 to 5% incremental value growth due to campaign activities, 0.5 to 1.2 point market share gains in competitive categories, and 12 to 18% improvements in customer acquisition efficiency over 3 to 6 months of launch. Now, there is also the diminishing returns paradox. You have to find optimal media investment to run it. Both underspending as well as overspending on media significantly impact your return on advertising spend. So, you have to find the optimal range where spending is correctly done for your organization. If you spend 25% less, your returns decrease by a certain amount, but 50% and you will actually get it far lower. 25% overspend, you will again see lower returns, and 50% overspend again will see lower returns. So, it says that for every $1 million in optimal media investment, the deviations from this ideal threshold create quantifiable efficiency losses for both communication effectiveness and bottom line financial outcomes. Severe underspending gives you 50% lesser, which is the most dramatic efficiency loss. But similarly, if you have got the ROAs coming down by 55% here and only 35% of potential awareness goals are being met, moderate overspending also 25% gives you 85% of efficiency compared to just 75% when underspent by the same percentage. And over rigorous analysis of 120 plus campaigns, you can see B2B and B2C sectors consistently demonstrating that strategically advantageous to slightly exceed your media budget rather than significantly under invest, particularly when communication objectives prioritize awareness building over immediate conversion metrics. This insight proves that a valuable during budget planning cycles when defending optimal investment levels to senior leadership. So, what are the common causes of communication ineffectiveness? Insufficient awareness. If people are not fully aware of what you are trying to do, why you are trying to do it, who are you going to affect, and what will be the outcome of it, there will be insufficient awareness if people are not aware of the category in which you are operating and why that category should exist and why as a brand you are able to provide certain benefits. Beyond this, there is obviously poor creative execution. If it is a weak creative, it will not have memorability. In fact, it may actually lead to negative PR, and despite a hammering over recall and a huge frequency, it will create worse recall for the brand, and you will have unconsidered factors which also come into play like competitive dynamics, because you may have done your work, but competition is not going to rest. So, there can be competitors who boost their spending by about 40% also. And what are the economic factors? You see missing how consumer confidence declines trigger 25% drops in conversion rates. So, the consumer confidence and their habits also have important impact on the communication ineffectiveness. Critical factors in communication success are message relevance. The first and foremost thing is the message has to be relevant for the audience. They need to understand that the message is exactly made for them and it affects their lives and their requirements immediately. The creative is designed in a certain way so that it becomes effective and it becomes lasting for that particular audience. The media chosen has to be exactly where the audience is currently present and is actually spending good amount of time on that particular media, so that your chances of getting the exposure across is heightened. Then it showcases the brand in a consistent light, and across channels you have integration. So, everywhere the communication that you are doing of your brand, of your messaging, of your campaign, all of these things are consistent and they give you a continuity in the messaging format. Now, here is a case study, Dove's campaign for real beauty. Now, here the campaign actually showcased women against choosing just plain Jane models, and they included women from all walks of life, all ages, etc., and all skin and body types as well. Launched in 2004, Dove's campaign for real beauty transformed beauty advertising by featuring women of diverse body types, ages and ethnicities. Their groundbreaking Evolution video, which revealed digital manipulation in advertising, generated over 40 million views and drove 700% surge in website traffic. This was really what virality was created at that point in time. This showcased how everyday women, instead of the industry's way standard 0 to 2 models, Dove forged authentic emotional connections with consumers fatigued by unrealistic beauty portrayals. How their strategic differentiation was, Dove uncovered a very powerful insight, and insights are core to the strength of the creative communication. 98% of women felt pressured by the worldwide beauty standards, while only 2% considered themselves beautiful. The brand leveraged this gap through multi-channel initiatives, including real beauty sketches, comparing self-perception with others' view, and creating the self-esteem fund. This dedicated 25% of the advertising budget to body sensitive education also. Dove elevated itself from just being a functional soap brand to a movement that competitors couldn't authentically replicate, because it was that deep and that connected with consumers, and it had measurable impact across all levels. And that is where the relationship between reach and frequency also comes. The Dove campaign for real beauty had showcased how repeated advertising exposure follows a classic curve of diminishing returns, whereas the strength of the critical insight was something which showcased better awareness and purchase intent, and beyond this threshold additional impressions yield diminishing returns, and just 5% increased awareness between exposures of 5 to 7 per campaign size. So, when you place the media correctly, the editorial versus advertising placement is also something which matters. Editorial content, PR professionals find it to be 5 to 10% the cost of equivalent advertising space, and gives you about 12x the value of paid space, because it comes as an opinion piece by the publication. And traditional advertising showcases that 76% marketers prioritize this control, and only 34% of consumers fully trust paid advertising. So, is it really creating any effort? And sponsorship exposure also is something which helps create 2.7 times higher recall than standard advertising. For example, Red Bull's Extreme Sports series generates 74% positive perception lift, while content sponsorships such as BMW films effectively blend control with credibility. Industry benchmarks showcase that $2.3 in media value for every $1 invested is the ROAS. So, there are modern tracking methods also beyond traditional metrics. Here you will see the new formats come in, text to insights, and now you will see Nielsen's neuromarketing research converting emotionally resonant advertisements to drive higher recall as well. And as AI creates more and more app based and database opportunities, you will see far more integrations come into play and used by marketers. You will see real time measurement, personalization impact, cross platform integration, and you will also ensure that they stay true to the privacy because of GDPR rules internationally. So, when you take communication measurement, your best practices should be to establish clear objectives. Smart communication goals come in help here: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and time bound. And you implement continuous measurement rather than doing it in jumps and starts. You balance your multiple metrics. So, you use acquisition cost, customer lifetime value, and all these other factors which we have discussed, and conduct a post campaign analysis as a must have. So, with these you will next have the AI powered analytics come into place, like we discussed. Emotion recognition technology from machines which will look at you and find out what your emotional response is to something, and you will have unified measurement frameworks where GDPR and CCPA regulations will all be met together. So, in the next time around, we will take the communication objective setting as the bigger discussion point, because once you have understood the entire lay and what communication can do, you need to understand how to go about doing this. So, until next time, this is me signing out.